sure you've heard of this infamous trade. The Thunder trade a aging Serge Ibaka for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis, which allows them to then trade for Paul George. They, of course, turned Paul George into Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all these picks. One of them allows them to draft Jalen Williams, and that leads directly to a championship for OKC. The lesser discussed element of this trade was actually the other side, the Blake Griffin to the Pistons trade that allowed the Clippers to get enough to make that Paul George trade in the first place. One part of it is Tobias Harris, who actually was pretty good for the Clippers, started to break out. He had already been traded twice in his career before he got traded to the Clippers. But the Clippers, he had the best season of his career, started to break out, and that allowed them to sell high on him at the trade deadline. They traded him to the Sixers. We all know how this goes. Tobias signs a massive contract. It limits the Sixers' flexibility and their ability to add other role players to the team. They never get to the conference finals. But in that trade, they traded Landry Shamet and 2 first-round picks. Both of those picks were involved in the eventual Paul George trade. But there was another first-round pick that was involved in this trade. Unless you're a Pistons or a Clippers fan, you probably don't know this. But the pick that was used to draft Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was actually from the Blake Griffin trade. Technically, it was Miles Bridges, but they did a draft night swap. It was Shai. It was Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, okay? While this trade seemed somewhat reasonable at the time because Blake Griffin was an all-star / all-NBA player, he was always injured, not really available, had one great season for the Pistons, and then they kind of went into a rebuild after that because he was never the same. So this trade's ripple effects were rebuild for the Pistons, Sixers kind of capping their ceiling before getting to the conference final, and ultimately giving them enough draft capital and players to trade for Paul George and sign Kawhi Leonard in free agency because he wanted a teammate to go with that was in his prime. The Pistons have finally recovered from the Blake Griffin trade, making the playoffs last year and winning a playoff game for the first time in forever. The Sixers, this era might be done for them, kind of kneecapped by that Tobias Harris trade. And the Clippers are doing fine considering they traded away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and all those draft picks, but they're still looking to have their first title for their own, and this year's probably their last chance. If you enjoyed this, we talked about the worst trades of the last decade on my podcast. On the last episode, we just posted it today. It's on YouTube.